Welcome to another episode of On the Way Home. I am Michael Braithwaite from Blue Door, and as always, joined. You know what? I shouldn't say as always. Most of the time, I am joined by the fantastical Stefania from the Canadian Alliance and Homelessness. Steph, after your hiatus, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm sorry. I know it was hard. It's been hard to book a flu shot. So when I finally got, one for me and my son, who's 3, because you can't take them to the local pharmacy, I just had to hop on it. So I appreciate Meg once again doing a stellar job filling in. And now that I'm back, refreshed from my flu shot, I'm ready to roll. How are you doing?
I'm good. Good. And Meg the Temp did a good job. She did a good job, but we missed you as always. Big things happening right now at Blue Door as I speak. Modular housing coming together on site for 18 new units built by the region of York, but we'll be operating that, hopefully, fingers crossed, in the spring of 2022. What's happening? You've come through the conference smiling. You're on the other end. What's new at the Alliance?
Yeah, what is new at the Alliance? I think right now we are really looking forward to the throne speech to Parliament sitting on National Housing Day and seeing what comes out of that, if that was, a specific choice that they made and what we will see from that. So I think we're just working on that right now. And of course, looking to the new year. I can't believe it's already November. It's crazy. Mid-November. Crazy.
It's funny you mentioned the throne speech. I was talking to our local MP just about a half hour ago, and he's like, "Hey, it'll be interesting to see what comes out." He wasn't giving anything away, but
of course,
and I don't think it's a coincidence that National Housing Day also falls on Mike Braithwaite's birthday, right? Like it's not a coincidence.
Oh,
every year.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
I love that.
Less exciting was that JFK was shot on the same day, but not the same year. Less exciting though.
Oh my God.
Let's go with National Housing.
Let's go with no National Housing Day. Yeah, I think that's more appropriate.
And listen, speaking of surprising and fantastical people, we have a great guest today. You want to hear more about her?
I am so psyched to hear more about her. Yes.
Dr. Alina Turner, and she won't, unless you call her doctor, she won't even answer you. I'm kidding. She's not like that at all.
100%. Don't even bother.
We have Dr. Alina Turner with us, who's the co-founder of HelpSeeker, a social enterprise focused on scaling systems innovation to accelerate social change across Canada. She is a researcher and entrepreneur. Alina has led the implementation of Canada's first homelessness management information system and designed Calgary's Housing First System of Care. She is a fellow at the School of Public Policy at the University of Calgary. And what is HelpSeeker? You might ask, well, she's going to tell us more about that, so you'll have to wait. But here's the Coles Notes version. HelpSeeker uses machine learning, machines, data science, and social innovation to help people access services that improve their lives. HelpSeeker is also a partner of the Systems Planning Collective, alongside the Canadian Observatory on Homelessness and Away Home Canada. Alina, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, and nice to meet you, Stefania. I think we've ran in different circles at some point, probably in the same circle, but we just probably never got to meet each other in person because of this whole thing, pandemic thing.
It's also what happens when you run in circles, right?
Good one, Michael.
I'm on fire today with dad jokes. Listen, we have a new question. We're fairly new that we've been asking the past couple of months to guests and getting various different answers, different themes. But we wanted to ask you, what does home mean to you?
Ooh, that doctor thing that you're making fun of me about. It was about the meaning of home in ethnocultural communities and how varied that concept is in terms of the cultural meanings and the symbolics of meaning, the power relationships, etc. So I'm just going to answer it as a mom, as a mom that is in a home. It's a sense of belonging, it's safety, it's it's where the heart is and all those cheesy things. But it's also unfortunately, for better or worse, where wealth is. in the Canadian context. So it's also where my life savings are. So it's a physical representation of hard work, but it's obviously much more than that because it's where I have my kid and I'm raising my kid in this thing and he's highly attached to it. So every time Travis and I ever even mention potentially changing something, he's like, no, we're never leaving here and this is my home. And so it's also the rootedness is important, and that does kind of bring me back to those cultural meanings of home. And from a anthropological perspective, when you study this stuff across cultures and across histories, there are some common elements to it, and rootedness comes to mind for me. And being the first generation in Canada, so I moved to Canada when I was younger, like we don't have those roots here versus back home. It's your home is like still over there in some ways. So I don't think home is just one thing, and I'm sure there's other folks who would probably agree with that it's a networks of ideas and emotions and people more so than a one specific place. Now, of course, those are easier said than done things when you've got them. So I know we're gonna get into that as well. Yeah, that's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, I love that. And while many folks might be familiar with yourself and HelpSeeker, for those who might not be, for the listeners who are not super in the know, I hope you might expand a little bit on both.
Sure. So, HelpSeeker is something I started with Travis, partner in child rearing. So my husband and we've been together since like we were 16. And, since we did everything else in life, we said, hey, why not put our relationship through a startup during a pandemic? So I think we got asked the other day, like, to explain some, something about a help seeker, and Trav's like, it's our second child in some ways. It's a startup, a technology B Corp, which is a social enterprise that looks at solving complex social challenges, leveraging things like data science, things like machine learning, things like software, but also looking at technology as much more than kind of the Western concept of technology. So, for instance, indigenous ways of knowing, and when we talk about what technology is, it's the application of knowledge to solve challenges. So we definitely don't just do the more traditional technology work, but that's definitely part of what we certainly do. So we build solutions for systems change to get scaled in an agile way, and we do so with communities across the country, and in ways that leverage kind of the acupuncture, if you will, of systems change, so that we can actually apply pressure to the right levels at the right time to make things happen. So one of the things that people are probably most familiar with is our work with developing a system navigation app to help people that might be trying to navigate the system to have access to the social safety net in a digital format. And essentially the experience that we're trying to bring it down to is, to have it as streamlined as calling an Uber, or to have it as streamlined as ordering food on DoorDash or Skip the Dishes, but with the social safety net instead. Now, to do that, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen. And the first one is that we actually don't have a systems map of the social safety net in Canada. And that's what we've been busy with in the last couple of years. So we started this 3 years ago with a kernel of an idea. We pulled poor Reese's $10,000 savings account because that was like his university thing. And we pulled that 10K and we built like the prototype of the app. And it was honestly a piece of shit, but whatever, it was making the point that we needed this. And from there, it kind of grew. So even though, it wasn't that great, there was still this huge need. So it kind of hopped from Medicine Hat is where we started it, because I had a long-standing relationship with Medicine Hat. And if you Google my academic stuff, that's kind of a lot of it comes out of that work in that community. Started it there, and it kind of took off in other communities. And then we're like, hey, I think there's something here. But what the other piece that we found is like, okay, not only did I think this, the quote system is fucked up, like it was way more fucked up than we initially thought. So the fragmentation, we had no idea. Like we were thinking maybe there's a couple of thousand services, can't be that hard. It's like we're at 300,000 in Canada and counting. So, and we're just starting in Quebec. We just started Quebec, I think, last month. So it's probably going to be way higher than that. And all different ways of talking about it, no common lexicon, no common ontology or taxonomy for it. Lots of work to do to get the kind of the system architecture defined. But, you don't know this until you start getting deep into the fragmentation when you try to put it back together in a holistic person-centered way. So we're definitely just at the beginning of this journey.
Yeah, and quite often we hear about systems change in the battle to end homelessness. And I'm just wondering, can you give us your thoughts on what systems change is and what role it plays?
Yeah, well, and I think it's important to talk a bit about the basics of systems analysis and network analysis, chaos complexity theory. Like these are not terms that we should throw around. Like they're very loaded, you know, theories that come with a lot of Western baggage along the way. So I mean, to me, what systems change is in terms of a framework is this concept that the sum of the parts is greater than the actual parts in and of themselves. And the equation that is often used is to say 1 + 1 not equal, right? Or equals 3. Right? Sometimes they say that, or not equals 2. So that's one of the equations where they try to explain the concept of network effects or emergence in terms of systems. So this idea that, when you have two actors in a network, their interaction brings value that is greater than those two components. So to your question around homelessness is a negative network effect. And so we need to understand what the components are, those basic elements of this network that is nested. So there's different layers of systems. And so when you think about challenging homelessness, you need to be working and finding those key pain points. And oftentimes acupuncture is used as a really good analogy because it tells you a little bit about the human organism and how everything is interconnected. So it's got organs, but they make up all together these cells. They create a functioning thing called the human body. And so knowing where to hit within this organism to get that network effect that enhances the well-being of the organism is kind of what we're trying to achieve when we say systems change. Like that's what the baggage is that we're bringing to it. So when you think about interventions in the homeless serving kind of node, when we forget that homelessness is an effect of this greater network of relationships and things and people, ideas, etc. And you need to understand what those connections are to actually make sure you're hitting the right thing. And I always critique, siloed approaches to the issue because to me it's all to do with this holistic approach that we need to take. And the minute that we say we're only going to talk about homelessness and we're not going to talk about poverty, we're not going to talk about systemic racism, we're not going to talk about these other aspects of well-being, that's kind of when we reproduce these systems inadvertently. So I always think about addressing homelessness as one of the kind of leverage points we might have, but we can't look at it in and of itself. So we need to understand it in this nested environment for sure. Sorry, that was like what you asked.
Well, I hear what you're saying. I mean, we quite often in social services work in silos, and even outside of that. And if we actually, and a lot of these things cross over each other, and if we continue to work in our silos, we're not going to move forward anytime quick. Now, listen, you do not have a pocket protector, nor do you have a big chunk of tape around your glasses. In fact, you're not even wearing glasses. I am. But let's talk about IT. When you think of homelessness, usually you don't think of IT being part of solving the issue, But it is. Can you talk to us a little bit about how IT fits into the equation?
Yeah, so information and technologies are obviously they permeate every single aspect of our lives, and that includes everybody that's experiencing some kind of vulnerability to this node of activity we call homelessness. So, oftentimes we always get challenged to say, well, homeless people don't have technology, and I'm always like, have you like not looked around your city hall, like where are the clusters of you know, or around your library. And do you ever notice that there's folks there that are trying to get the free Wi-Fi? So the studies we always reference are showing that sometimes people that are experiencing homelessness are even more connected than others because it's a lifeline. And one study that talked about this among youth populations in particular talked about, that I'm homeless, not phoneless. Like lots of people have technology, and because of the recycling of technology out, you can have access to older devices that you can obviously tap into free Wi-Fi to get access to. Now that doesn't mean that they have like the newest greatest iPhone with a plan, but therefore your technology solutions need to be kind of right sized for the types of access to tech that they folks might have. From a system planning perspective, having the ability to connect all these components like we were talking about before. So if we think of everybody in the network of services needing to be connected, do we have those common unifying technologies that are enabling us to share data, respecting privacy, respecting sovereignty of the individual and the community, in the case of Indigenous communities, to move the system forward as a network instead of a bunch of silos. So that's the stuff that we're building right now, is to say, okay, cool, we've mapped the system, we're letting people connect to services. They're telling us that's cool. That actually didn't solve my problem because the services that you're advertising to me, HelpSeeker, are not what I'm looking for. I'm like, holy shit, if 300,000 services are like not hitting it for you, like what are we missing, right? And we don't know that until, of course, you need to map it, you need to analyze it, you need to see. The number one thing everybody across Canada always asks for is housing. So and during the pandemic, food became the number one thing in the middle there for a bit, but now it's back to housing. And then the second thing is mental health and addictions and safety. So those are kind of the common pieces. But from there, when people peruse the menu, if you will, imagine going on Skip the Dishes and seeing like, holy shit, like there's like every kind of cuisine there is out there. But making the call and not getting the food, or not even getting acknowledgement that your call was received. Like there's a major disconnect right now because of this. And I'm postulating that technology could fix this because it's fixed it in many, many other industries. So I don't see why in a sector where we're so committed to the greater good and to our participants and our members of the network, why we wouldn't be able to fix this when restaurants fix it. So I'm really hoping that with building the technology stack and solving some of these data security challenges on sharing information across systems, that we can make it, I always say like social safety net, I always talk about that. But it's actually more of a social safety network that we're trying to build, and having that unifying technology to enable the network to function in a efficient manner. I'm hoping that is part of this. It's not everything that needs to happen, but it's definitely something that's sorely missing, no matter if you talk to somebody in like on the mental health side or on the housing and homelessness side or community safety, or you name it. It's the same problem in every silo. So that's why I always say, like, we can't just talk about homelessness. It's a deeper systemic failure, and we're never going to solve it if we just stop there. We need to be couching it into this bigger discussion to make sure we actually hit the root causes of it. But we're not everything, right? Like, we're just one of the technology kind of enablers in this. It's going to take a whole lot more to make this happen.
Well, this is extremely, extremely complex, difficult. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of social services being out there trying to create this net, weave technology into it. It's ever changing. And with that in mind, I'm sure there's been a few challenges along the way in getting this going. Can you talk about some of the bigger ones that you've had to overcome or still working on?
Oh my goodness. Well, and I actually think it's, Tim and I would always joke when we were implementing HMIS, like the Homeless Management Information System in Calgary, that the privacy was like the least of our concerns because there were so many other culture change problems that we had to get over. But I think with this, the good news is the security stuff is like foundational to it. And even though it's a really tough nut to crack, like we've got, like dozens of people working on this right now to figure it out because it hasn't been done before. But I think that's kind of the major challenge right now is like, it's actually way easier it was relatively straightforward to implement the Homeless Management Information System in Calgary. When I think about it, like it really wasn't that sophisticated. It's when you're looking at all systems with thousands of funders and 300,000 services, like with everybody wanting different things from it, to find a way forward that puts the end user, or that's like tech speak, but essentially the network, the recipient of supports or the help seeker, and in some cases they're not even a participant yet. If you put that person in the driver's seat around their data and security, that changes the narrative as well, because suddenly the way you're sequencing the components of the system to build off of each other needs to be rethought, because if you're using the person-centered approach, then it kind of challenges how we do things like intake. Even the concept of coordinated access needs to be, disrupted from that perspective, because that is a system intervention, not a person intervention. That's not how people find help. So how do you actually make a network effect happen to enhance access and triage, but doing that in a distributed ecosystem rather than you can't centralize your way out of it is the point. You can centralize pockets of it, but then you're getting the problem that we're seeing right now, which is that every community has, 5-6 different complex needs tables operating simultaneously on top of each other. And so again, we've now created this intermediary of bureaucracy in the middle that is, arguably creating even more barriers to access in some communities. Not saying it's not needed. I was a huge advocate, and I'm still a huge advocate for coordination of access. But to me, it's about democratizing that and transparency rather than creating another safety valve. Because again, to me, it's still missing the bigger picture. It's part of it. Maybe it's part of the trajectory and learning that we have to do to figure this out. But when you're in a community and you're like, oh, this is like the 5th coordinated access table I've been to this week, and we're still talking about the same clients. And I mean, there was one piece that I wrote a couple of years ago that had more coordinated access type tables than they had clients they were talking about. So that to me is like missing the point completely. Now, is it the implementation? I don't really give a fuck where it's gone wrong. It's not it. And so the minute we think we have it, and I know that's probably one of your questions, the minute we think we have it is like, that's when we don't have it because that means we're not seeing the complexity anymore. And yeah, sorry. Go on. Question.
No, that's great. And well, you know what, actually, I was going to, I guess, shift gears a little bit and kind of bring it back to HelpSeeker itself. And, we've all seen how rapidly it's grown over the past couple of years. I know my colleagues and I are always on your site, just amazed, especially around as we're learning how we can better implement, our commitments to reconciliation, decolonization, just to name a few. So can you talk to us a little bit about HelpSeeker's growth, what you're working on, and what you have, what's you've set your sights on in the future?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that we're working on right now is this is to enable referrals in the network. So to actually not just show people what's out there, but actually to onboard early adopter service providers that are looking to shift how they do intake, for instance, and how they do assessment into a more democratized, transparent way, so that we can use the system to actually connect people into service, not just, you know, it's like, again, I'll use the skip the dishes analogy because people will be like super familiar with it, but you look at them, you find the cuisine that you're looking for, you find the restaurant, it's got good ratings, and now you want to put in your food order. So we're at the part right now where we're building the putting in your food order part. So that means, that means that there's somebody on the other side that's waiting for the order, that's able to confirm the order. Yeah, you're eligible. Yes, this is a good fit, and here's the next steps and what to expect in your journey with us. So that is the big next sprint for us in terms of product roadmap.
That's really exciting. And I love the analogy, but I can only imagine how much more work is really behind that to get that up off the ground and like flying across, like, all of the folks and organizations that you mentioned earlier are part of the app. So I don't know, just super exciting to watch where this goes, because I think, technology, ending homelessness, as we've been saying, aren't always something that we see intermingling. So I really feel like you folks are kind of at the forefront and sort of leading the way and finding out like what the possibilities are. So I just think that's super exciting. And having said all that, where can folks go to learn more information or seek out HelpSeeker?
Yeah, for sure. So just for what we're up to and kind of watching the journey on this next phase, the helpseeker.co site, that's like where we keep all our like company news and the team and what we're working on. And then for folks that are needing help or needing to, peruse these 300,000 supports out there, just go to helpseeker.org. It's free, it's anonymous. It's brought to you by Government of Canada, Canada Mortgage and Housing Company. So it's definitely part of that bigger play in terms of housing affordability and addressing homelessness as part of a broader understanding of the social safety net and where housing fits within that, and where ending homelessness fits within this bigger discussion around social supports and building a kind of a strong ecosystem. So that would be where people could find us. We're also on like Twitter and LinkedIn and like apparently TikTok. It's like, so, yeah, not my generation, but I guess it's some people's thing. So it's a rabbit hole if you actually go in there. I might not come out of.
Well, listen, Dr. Turner, as you like to be called, thank you so much for making time out of your rounds to join us on the podcast today. The only bigger and bigger things I'm sure are to come from HelpSeeker. As a service provider myself, I'm looking forward to HelpSeeker coming into York region. And you're absolutely right. We need that. We need someone, because so many organizations on the front line are just doing the day in, day out, trying to house people and do that. They can't pull this all together. So we're very appreciative of you and your team, and the work you're doing is very much needed. I'm excited to see what happens in the future. Despite the challenges that are before you, I have no doubt that you are going to rise above. We're going to see great things. Thanks for joining us.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, Steph, sometimes doctors can be intimidated, but I found Dr. Turner had a pretty good, manner. So, all kidding aside, yeah, we are working with Alina right now and the team trying to bring HelpSeeker into York Region, because I and Blue Door and a lot of the organizations there need that help and see the need for systems.
Well, maybe we'll have Blue Door as like our first like York specific entity that's like receiving stuff from the youth. That would be fun. Do you have like youth that will like just tell us like, I hate this, I hate that, like super like, you know, like that's like everything.
Pretty much all of them. Yeah. Cool.
Perfect. That's like the greatest strength. It's like, it's called UX, like UX research, and it's like when you put something in front of somebody and they're like, "This is a piece of shit. This doesn't make sense. This is stupid. What is this?" And like that's what makes it better, because like every time you go through a cycle like that, is like that's how you learn. So.
I think what you're referring to is brutal honesty. And I remember when I was at 360 Kids, and we got these, I'll tell you about brutal honesty from these kids. We got all these donations from Whole Foods. And so they're drinking like, you know, hand made grass-fed milk from cows that were only, you know, saw the sun 3 hours a day. And it was like $9. They were like, "What is this crap? It's just like shit. Do you have any regular milk back there?" So yeah, brutal honesty. I think you'll get that.
That's the one. That's the one. That's
universal.
What we need. Yeah, you don't need politeness. We're too busy to be polite. Exactly.
Get to the point.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, anytime I would love to get into it, Michael. So
perfect.
Yeah, and Stefania, let me know if there's anything like you guys. I always like told Tim, like when we started this like 3 years ago, I'm like, hey, we should do something together. And I demoed it like 1 billion times, but I don't know. I think it's just maybe you guys are too busy with your own stuff, but would love to do stuff.
No, I think it would be really cool. I really think connections are important, you know, so I think, yeah, anytime. But yes, we are we've got a lot going on, to put it mildly. But it's funny when you guys were talking about youth, it made me think of this like John Lithgow quote when he was saying, you know, the difference between performing to an adult live audience is even if you're bombing, they're very polite, you know, they sit and they sit through it. Whereas if you're bombing in front of kids, they riot. And so I always think of that analogy when dealing with youth. And I do think that would lead to faster changes for the best.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, listen, we could talk forever. We got to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. Another great episode of On the Way Home. We will see you next time.